Can everyone hear me? That sounds good. Right, so sea containers has been my life for the last 3 years. And it was our biggest project in the studio. I'm going to explain a bit about who BDG are and how we work shortly, but it's been the biggest project in the studio. And I've been on a bit of a roadshow for the last few months because it's been live and active for the last 4 months. And my roadshow is kind of a bit architectural and designy, so I'm going to try and do like 20 minutes, and then you guys seem like a friendly bunch. And you can ask me as many questions as you want. Also, we have 2 people in the audience who are in the building, so actually you can ask the end user some questions as well, so I thought that might be quite interesting. So Sea Containers is a big building on the river, and these are the main tenants in the building. I don't know if anyone knows these brands. So Ogilvy Mather Advertising, MEC Media, they both belong to WPP, who are a big global sort of advertising communications company. And these are the multiple brands that are in the building. So Ogilvy have a group of companies with their own chief execs, their own P&Ls, their own teams and characters and culture, and they all do very different things, from traditional advertising to branding to PR to digital, and MEC Media as well. So we had the challenge of getting all these different brands and people into one single environment. It's 2,300 people, just to give it a bit of scale. Around the organisation. Ogilvy, prior to being in Sea Containers House, were in 2 locations. They were over in Canary Wharf, strange location for an advertising agency, but when they moved there, no one else was there. They thought they'd be the people that would bring all the media and creative industries over to Canary Wharf. It failed. However, as a business, they grew hugely, and although in the industry, in the advertising industry, it was seen as a very strange move, internally as a business, it was very successful because they grew their business and their headcount. They were also over in the West End in Paddington. About 40% of their headcount was over there, and that was a sort of unknown fact, if you like. They didn't really realise that, the industry didn't really realise there was people out over there. MEC were already on the South Bank, just behind it, and had grown hugely in the time that they were in their building as well. So we had basically 2 big organisations. So again, to give you a bit of perspective, MEC were about 600 at the time, 700-ish now, and busting at the seams, needed to move to a building that would, where they were signing a 20-year lease, so a building that would support their ever-changing sort of dynamics of their businesses, and allow them to grow and flex and shrink and move and acquire and do all the things that they've been doing for the past few years without any future real estate costs or taking more space. And the building they found was here. So you can see MEC just had a little shift 2 blocks towards the river, so we've got river views. But it was a big change, obviously, for Ogilvy to come from east and west over to the South Bank. So much to the horror of some of my clients who are in the audience, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Ogilvy and Mather and their relocation, given that they were bigger and they had a bigger cultural change. And I am going to try and bring it back around to the business and people if I can, seeing as that's your target audience. So the South Bank, the business has been looking at various locations around London for a very, very long time, trying to find a building that would support their size, scale, and provide the type of environment they wanted and the lease that they required. Importantly, of course, when you're choosing that kind of place for a long period of time, Ogilvy in particular were very keen they didn't make the same mistake they made when they moved to Canary Wharf 25 years previously. So they wanted somewhere more central, somewhere that was well connected, somewhere that represented creativity, where they could get good talent, attract staff, and keep staff. So the South Bank, with its creative mile and its various cultural venues, its activity outside of work, so it's a very sort of vibrant, lively space, not just between 9 to 5, but also 7 days a week and later into the evening. Feels kind of obvious now, but I don't think it was at the time, and it wasn't until they found the space in the building that they really realised that might be where they would be better off being. And MEC had already been there for a long time, very keen not to move, so the staff liked being in the South Bank, or near the South Bank, so actually finding a space that was 2 blocks towards the river for them was like a dream scenario, really. So Sea Containers itself, if you know London and know the building, it's a very, very big building on the river. This is historically what it looked like for years and years. It was built as a hotel in the early 70s, never occupied as a hotel. So it was never built and designed as an office environment, so it had various sort of complexities around architecture, around what that meant for the businesses moving in. It had sat empty for a long time and was used as a big advertising hoarding, which is maybe appropriate, seeing as the businesses moving in are in that world. And this is what it this is what it looked like when we basically inherited it to do our fit out. So very big and prominent building on the river. I think it is the biggest commercial office frontage on the Thames, just to, again, set the scene. So I think, again, for the businesses moving in, the idea of staying where they were or moving two different businesses together on the river, big prominent building on the Creative Mile, just felt like a really nice nice connection to them as a character and culture. The views are great. I just thought I'd stick them up because the views are phenomenal from the upper floors. So I'm going to talk about three things. I guess people, architecture and organisation, I guess, around how we design. And this is a bit about who we are and what we do. So BDG is an architectural practice or architectural design practice. We're about 50 people, but we have a specialist team that deal just purely in how the built environment impacts on organisation and people. So we have a process which we call evidence-based design, which, before it's strange as a creative director to talk about sort of data, and it sounds like dull and boring and spreadsheets, but actually we can't do in the creative side of the business what we want to do without some foundation to back up some big decisions. So this is the process we go through. The assess is where we look at the space, so the space that the businesses or organizations are currently in, and how that operates, and how much space is dedicated to desks, and how much space is dedicated to rooms and receptions and tea points and so on. The audit is where we look at the organization and the people, so we do staff questionnaires. So a staff questionnaire went out to all 2,300 people. We interview key stakeholders, leadership. We spend time in the businesses themselves, so our team will go in there and observe the sort of working dynamics of the environment. And the align is probably quite obvious. It's where we grab both those bits of information and bring them both together. So I always like to think of assess as place and audit as people, and then how do we sort of bring those two things together to make a better environment, whether you're staying where you are or whether you're relocating. So that's our kind of foundation for how we design, and I'll talk to you about the design next. Interestingly, this process on this project was about 9 months, so it's not something we do in like 3 or 4 weeks. The more time we can get with an organization and its people in the business, the better understanding we get of their dynamic and how the environment can support that organization, the better the end result ultimately will be. So we really work hard to try and get as much time in that sort of part of the process as possible. So location, so I mentioned it's on the river. We had to competitively pitch for the project. This was our one of the visualizations from our pitch, and that is a swimming pool overlooking the Thames, 13 floors above. That is a glass retractable sliding roof, and that's an indoor winter garden, but that's how you win design competitions. Lots of crazy ideas. I mean, we knew the client didn't have a budget for a barrel vaulted concrete cast swimming pool, but it looks great in that visual, doesn't it? And we pitched for the project. It's a big project with a big spend and a long lease. We didn't show a single visualization of an office environment. And so I think that was quite a bold move, but again, it's sort of know your client, they're creative, they'd do the same kind of creative pitch to their clients. So it was very much about adapting what we maybe typically do to suit our audience. Location, and you saw the views earlier on. These are the top two sort of diagrams of the top 2 floors of Sea Containers. When we were being toured around the building by the developers, because when the lease was signed, the building wasn't quite finished, the developer would walk us around the top 2 floors with those fantastic views, and they'd say, these are going to make great executive offices. And we were just sat there going, oh, no, it's going to make great space for everyone. So this environment on the top 2 floors of Sea Containers is available to everyone in the building, essentially. It's their client-facing pitch spaces on level 12. It's a canteen, it's a bar, it's a restaurant. There's an amphitheater, you can see there. It's access to a rooftop terrace, which we put a new rooftop terrace upstairs in the building as well on level 14. So essentially that environment was designed for everyone to enjoy and everyone to get the benefit of the views. So we had very much, the essence of our design pitch was this idea about a democratic sort of allocation of space, and this was a key part of it. This was how the visualizations look as we developed the design. So you can see the amphitheater. Unfortunately, the swimming pool's gone. The indoor winter garden became some flower pots on a shelf. But there you go, that's what happens. But what we did do up here, you can see just on where the swimming pool was, there's an external terrace. So the client committed to the concept that at that point in the building, which was the furthest point you'd be at from your point of arrival, there had to be something special. and it wasn't a swimming pool, but in this case it was an outdoor space where you have fantastic views out over the West End of London. So, even though it wasn't a swimming pool, the actual concept of what was there was retained. It does this. So it closes off to be an amphitheater, sort of auditorium space for 200 people. And here's some pictures of it finished and in use. So we have the terrace at the top and the outdoor space I just mentioned instead of the swimming pool. And importantly, you can imagine the idea of taking 2 whole floors in a building and making it everything that isn't desks is quite a bold move. So it was important that all those spaces had to be workspaces. So, I mean, they are genuinely spaces where you can go, sit down with your laptop, you've got great Wi-Fi, and you can sit there and work. And it was important that we had to make every one of those spaces have sort of multiple functions and be able to be used for that purpose. This is the amphitheater and some of the meeting rooms. Some key, I guess, statistics around this type of building and this type of environment. So it's 2,300 people and it's 1,700 desks. So it's agile. And I'm not going to use the word hot desking and flexible and all that stuff. It's just a new ways of working and all that stuff. The biggest thing from the 9-month study was when we sat down with focus groups and steering groups, and the biggest concern would be, we're really nervous about, new ways of working and changing the way we work in the new building. And we were just adamant that, well, we're not here to change the way you work. We're here to change the environment to suit the way you want to work or the way you are working now. The way you work is entirely up to you. Our job is to make the space reflect that. So when we did all our analysis, we found out that it was over 60% of the floor area. I'm trying to remember the exact figure. I think it was about 68% of the floor area was a desk space. It was just normal desk. Everyone had a desk. That's what they thought. Actually, when you looked at their head count and desk count, they were already agile. But they thought everyone had a desk. And in this new environment, it's only 38% of the floor area is traditional desk space. And it was getting over that boundary of, well, that's still a workspace. Just because you're not on a desk doesn't mean you're not working. And the spaces that better suit the activities and tasks that people are doing that aren't desks. This is their bar and canteen, which is next to the amphitheater. This is their staff restaurant and bistro, so different types of settings, different types of offers, different types of subsidies. So choice was a very, very big part and portion of this project. And then architecture, right. So this was the building as we inherited it, mostly. So for those of you who are in the building, that picture on the right-hand side is your reception 3 years ago. It looks very different now. And this is level 2 down near the river. When the client was signing the lease to the building, the developer was going to make it look like this, which was all shiny floors, ceilings, integrated lighting. And we just said, stop, make them stop. Because essentially what would happen is we'd go in and rip most of that out to make it, to calibrate it along this line of reflecting the architecture we were inheriting in the building. There is something scary about that, but actually something quite beautiful about that amount of concrete and steel as well. You can't build a building like this these days. So modern buildings don't use this amount of concrete. There's 40 times more concrete in this building than there is in a modern commercial office building. So we were about celebrating that sort of inherent fabric that we were getting from the building. That's me. So some of the problems in the architecture, whether it was built as a hotel, I mentioned, not as an office space, so the floor-to-ceiling heights are really quite low, really big concern for the client. The building's 100 meters. You come out the lifts, you can see 50 meters either way, pretty much, with a very sort of dense, repetitive steel grid. So we had a big sort of architectural conundrum on how do we get rid of all those problems about feeling like you're in a very, very big space and it's got very, very low ceilings with this sort of imposing structure. So this was our key, concept around organizing some of the space. So the diagram's a bit abstract, but essentially where it says structural system, imagine that's a river, and the 3 boxes at the back, imagine that's where the lifts are, and you can see the steel work. We essentially began to cut and open up sections of the building, and push and pull sections of slab and concrete, and make them sort of occupiable spaces that people could sort of inhabit and use to get between floors. It's a building with multiple floors, with multiple businesses and organizations that want to get together and collaborate and meet. So how do we do that as well as alleviate the problems I highlighted on the previous slide? So we had this kind of complex architectural arrangement of spaces that allowed us to have, through the middle with the red sort of wiggly line, sort of slow-moving spaces where people can stop and occupy space and communicate, and in the east and west wings, faster stairs where people can just very quickly get between floors to see people and do sort of working tasks. This was the competition visualization, hanging gardens. Always need a hanging garden in an office at a competition stage. The river out on the left. This was the sort of the developed design visualization. Here's some of the site pictures as we created that space, and here's one of the finished pictures. We couldn't have done this level of intervention into the building without having done that 9-month period of consultation to let the client know that that expenditure and alteration to the architecture was of value. It got rid of all their architectural concerns about low floor-to-ceiling heights. We've now got triple height, double height, height and a half space here. It got rid of the complications about how do you get between floors, because this became the stairs as much as the sort of big open space. Importantly, the environment as you come out of the lifts, we broke down by pushing sort of things to the east and west, the office space, the east and west, and just having these big open spaces in the middle. So we got rid of those big, that feeling of walking onto floor space that was sort of very long, 100 meters long. And this is it, sort of active. It's a shame I don't have a photograph of the MEC space, because you've got the most beautiful concrete spiral stair. But we're photographing that in the next couple of weeks. So this is the active, and you can see, and we'll talk a little bit about behavior. I think this photograph's quite good for it. So we have people doing things that, it doesn't matter how much science you have, we've got people doing things here that we didn't expect, sitting on the fan coil units, breaking them. We've had to replace a few already. So we're now working out, do we have to strengthen them? Because do we like that activity, or do we want to put a sign up that says, don't sit on the fan coil unit? But, so that's quite interesting. Over here, I'm going to walk over and point. You can see this cable here just trailing along. To somebody using a laptop. Again, science and the evidence played a big part in defining this environment, which is bookable, non-bookable, individual working, collaborative, small groups, big groups. It's hugely visible. I can see from level 9 to level 11, so I know what spaces are available to me if I'm not booking them. And if you look at the furniture, you realize that the furniture is quite sort of deliberately uncomfortable, and there's deliberately not power in some of these settings as well. So 90% of staff have laptops. We want them to sit down and work, but actually we want them to get up and move so the next person can come along and sit down and work. So it was sort of, deliberately sort of don't put the power in, make the chairs slightly uncomfortable, and force people to move and that dynamic to happen, so you get that bigger crossover of people, you get more movement in the building, more people talking to each other, bumping into each other. The trouble is people like the space so much, which is a great endorsement for us, that they're ripping up floor boxes, plugging their laptops in and dragging their cables 3 meters across the floor to work, and they're spending all day there. So we're working closely with the client over the next year, doing constant sort of post-occupancy evaluation to work out why those things are happening, and is there a better way of either educating staff on how those spaces should work, or adapting the space to suit the type of activity that we're seeing happening in it. So for example, do we just strengthen these window sills essentially so people can't sit on them? So we're doing that now. It's been a great space to see come alive because we've been working on it for so long. Interestingly as well, I think from the competition pitch, we're delivering, there you go, there's a cable. Shouldn't be using that floor box. We deliberately, 85% of the competition I think we delivered, actually. So I think we held on to the science behind our process and forced it all through. And it was challenging at times. But it is great to see the space sort of come alive and be used. Again, I don't think I've photographed many desks here, you'll notice. But lots of, technology like soft phones, so there's no more desk phones, great Wi-Fi capability. It just means that people can get up and genuinely use any space that they want to use. It's another staircase. That's one of the quick staircases that you saw on the wings before, where people can get to one floor to the other floor very quickly. I think when we spoke to both businesses, MEC and Ogilvy, they had this vision that they'd occupy their businesses across a floor plate. Until we pointed out to them that if you had one member of staff there and one member of staff there, that's a 100-meter dash to get them to talk. Whereas if you cut a hole in the slab and put a stair in, it's 12 steps to get to the next level. So suddenly the low floor-to-ceiling heights became a positive for the business, not a negative. And some great meeting room spaces. So a quick summary, I've put this up because I think what's fascinating about all the spaces we're creating now, of course, is social media. And I'm going to put it up because it's all positive, positive feedback. There might be some negative in there, I haven't looked recently, but essentially what we've found with the building is as people moved in, there was a hashtag set up to talk about the building, and then people began to photograph it in a way that we'd never photograph it. And show things that we'd typically never show, including sort of great settings and endorsements of things like agile working, which become positive for the organisation, and great feedback from staff that are just on the floor, which is really, really good. So there's office dogs as well, yeah, dog policy. Have MEC got any dogs? No. It's really funny when you design an environment and you see a really nice sofa that you've spent a lot of time making sure you shoehorn it into the budget, and it's from Italy and it's covered in leather or something. And you walk upstairs and there's a dog lying on it, slobbering all over it, and you're like, oh, really? Can you just, live with it perfect for just 3 weeks? Some great branding. Yeah, obviously, the setting is spectacular. And in fact, if you look at some of the hashtags, you'll notice that most of the images are probably of the view and not of our design. But anyway, the Amphitheater in use. Skip through these so you can get the gist of it, but it is, there you go, somebody breaking the building, another stair. It's funny as well, because you do things like you design these, the wire mesh there is on the balustrades around all the openings we created, and typically in an office environment that'd be glass maybe, and we fought really hard to maybe do something a bit different. So we put the wire mesh in and we spent ages getting it architecturally right, wrapping it around the balustrade, and then you get pictures like that, which I love actually. I quite like the playfulness of all of that, but it's funny to see the buildings come alive and be used or adopted how you wouldn't necessarily think they would be. And I think this is me getting to the end. I think that might be it. Yeah, perfect, right, so I'll pause there. I don't know how I'm doing on time. Okay. So I thought I'd just sort of throw open to the floor, see if you had any questions around either the project, the businesses, the process.